Happy Sunday and welcome back to Retake the Week. It has been a little while, both of us on holiday last weekend, so there's going to be quite a few extra topics to recap, a lot of shuffling and a lot of chit-chat. But before we get into that, let's just quickly look over at who makes this show possible. It is, of course, the members. The members get access to a bunch of extra content. They get access to basically having rights. If you pay for them, you get to vote on other topics. You get to find out what's going on behind the scenes, and you get to see interviews with members of the scene that you wouldn't really see on a show normally. So that's what the members get. Become a member, support the show. That's always awesome. Quacke, do you have anything to promo before we get into the rest of the show?
I posted an article yesterday where I interviewed 3 people who cheated in a competitive tournament, and that's on Dust 2. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. It took weeks to finish that thing and just get it through. But it's been cool. I think a lot of people find it interesting. A lot of the information isn't like new. It's like they talk about how VAC sucks and other anti-cheats are better. But then it's also like at the end, it's like, do you have any problems with doing this? And they're all like, oh no, like if you take video games seriously, you're an asshole. Like that's the sort of POV they're going with. I thought it was an interesting chat, and yeah, it's out. And you can go read it on Dust 2 Sweden.
Of course, no accountability, no shame, and no life. Cheaters.
Yep.
Never change, but okay. And slightly more positive news. We do have some new segments on this episode. Mostly one very important one right there. Mystery guest. Those of you who've seen the behind the scenes, members, will know who this is because I just did the graphics whilst we were live recording it because I thought I was going to try and keep it an absolute surprise for everyone, but instead I just absentmindedly started writing his name on the screen. So those of you who know will know. But joining us today is the analytics guru of HLTV, the man whose articles made us start reading. I mean, we love him and hate him for that. But more importantly, joining us to discuss the new rating 2.1, potentially rating 3.0, and other things analytics when it comes to CS2. It is NER0 of HLTV fame. And man, thank you for joining us, the first ever guest on Retake the Week. And of course, to talk about numbers. What nerds we are.
It's always the numbers, always the numbers. Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Be a good one. Hopefully I'll just not too much PR in my defense of my lovely number that tells you how good a player is.
Yeah, obviously we all know that if a player has a good HLTV rating, they're a good player. There's no other nuance involved. Analysis is for frauds. Just follow the formula. But on that note, quickly, I watched the HLTV Confirmed, and I heard a bit that kind of threw me for a loop because I wasn't sure how this worked. How do you gather the stats that you use? Because you seem to imply that demo passing was too much processing. Is it something else? Is it following the scoreboard?
Yeah, so it's like, you have the scoreboard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like on HTV, you have the scoreboard and it's like boom kills who, boom, boom kills who. So we don't pass demos because they just like half of them break. It's like enough errors in a day of games that it's not worth it. It's more expensive. It's just worse. So we have actual game logs. Like people who work in tournament ops will know what a game log is, but it's basically like a scoreboard log, but a bit more complicated. So it will be like, if you read one, it's awful. It's like boom kills who at the time, and it's like that's kind of it. Our one's a bit more complicated. It's got everything you need for rating 2.1, but when we started developing it, we realized that there was a lot of stuff that you would expect from a demo that isn't in an actual game log because it is it's very like just normal information, right? Like even flash assists are calculated differently and things like that, which is also why we'll get onto it, I'm sure, but it's why we're relying on Valve assist figures as well. Like it's why it's a bit harder because everyone like I've passed a demo and it's like it's not hard to put economy in, right? But because it's a different process, it is a bit harder. And there is economy in game logs as well, but but yeah, it's not demos. Demos have way more information. Like they have location of players and everything. Like you can get positions of players from demos. Demos are better, but yeah, they're not worth it for the amount of games we have to cover, basically. So yeah, that is a problem, but we're fine.
Yeah, because no, the economy question comes up every time, and often people they like to go back to the example of Letify rating. So like, oh, Letify rating has economy factored in, but I'm always like, have you guys seen the output of Letify rating? Like sometimes do you not question, is this really the holy grail of statistics? Because to me it seems a bit sus sometimes. So I'm not really sure I can give that too much credit by itself. Like it's a bit suspect.
Yeah, I mean, I think because I've done quite a lot of trying to look into the fire rating, and I have the problem people have with HLTV, which is it's quite hard to analyze something when you don't know exactly what goes into it. But when you actually look at the output of the fire rating, I think the kind of if you rely too much on the like live round win probability, you just end up rewarding the players who do like incremental good things, which is like the passive players, right? So it's like players like NAF will do nothing wrong. They'll save at the right times. They'll get their one kill and survive a lot of rounds. And that just gradually gets you to like a +2 Leah fight rating or something. Whereas aggressive players are going up and down, up and down, up and down. They're just losing fights on their own in mid, early round. And then it just makes it so much harder for you to get high rating. So that is one of the things that I want to keep in mind for 3.0, because when we look at all these other formulas, even like there's like other ratings out there, they all reward passive players much more than HLTV. And I think what I want to look into is if that is like just that HLTV is over rewarding aggressive players, because like obviously dying is bad still. So we need to check that we're not over rewarding these passive players. But I think a lot of the other round win probability ones do just end up only rewarding passive players. And even like economy rating, if you just slap a full buy filter on to kills, you'd be shocked at how many times it's just the AWP of a team who's like clearing of everyone in rating, even on Skybox Edge or something. So there are things to consider in terms of how much it'll shuffle the order by using something more like Leafify. But yes, obviously that is maybe just how the game works. Like maybe that's just a flaw in HTV rating and not like a function we actually want of overrating aggressive players.
That must be really difficult, like weighing how much we should penalize passivity over aggressiveness, like, and all of these things. You don't like in this case, the rating is sort of the correct answer, so to speak. Like there's no like the frame of reference would be, I guess you look at a game and think, how do I think this guy did in passive aggressiveness, and then look at the rating and see if you think it's fair. Like that must be really difficult to do. Or is there a process behind that? Like how do you vet the answers as correct for something like this?
Yeah, I mean, for 2.1, we didn't really do that because 2.1 is such it's like I even called it a hot fix. I think in the article, it is literally just trying to fix 2.0 for CS2 and for saving that has increased so much since the formula came out, right? I think for 3.0, we will need a more wide-ranging process, because you can't really go into like tweaking formulas and things until you know like the exact round win probability of something happening. So like you need to know like how much an opening kill's worth. Like we know that people win like 75%, 74% of 5v4s, right? So then that's how you know how much value to give an opening kill. Like that's the number that has always been the number, like CS 1.6, CS Go, whatever. But is it the same in CS2? Maybe, maybe not. Like who knows? So it's one of those where we just have to check like every factor of rating. We need to know how much it's contributing to round wins, and then that's the way we have to do it. We have to start from the ground up. Like I can't look at it and say I want to nerf this type of player, because it'll just like people are accusing us of that with James. It's not that. It's just that survivor rating was broken. It's
was
not that
kind
we
of
just.
needed.
It's not a James nerf. It was just James and players like James broke the rating because those players didn't exist when the formula was made.
Yeah,
So that's all it is. It's ground up. It's not. We don't think of players. We're going to have to just literally look at each metric on its own, like on its own merit, and see where it takes.
yeah, because I did see someone complain like, oh, they just wanna buff like super aggressive players. They just wanna like they're going for like exciting over correct or like something like that. And I was like, you didn't read the article. You read the headline.
Yeah, I can see why people think that. I do think maybe 2.1 probably skews it a bit too much against authors, for my liking, just because we weren't able to change a lot of the stuff that is around riflers. So I do think that's probably I would expect authors to go back up basically once we introduce economy and stuff, because they're just really important and they don't die very much. Like the reason your best player gets the gun, right? So you do have to be a bit careful, especially when damage is such a big part of rating. That if we punish AWPers in survival, it's like I think one of the ways people talk about it is to basically the roles kind of even out. if the rating's working correctly, because AWPers will get free survival because it's just a more passive role sometimes. And then riflers will get a lot of free damage, a lot of free assists, a lot more eco kills maybe. So it's actually more like the passive riflers, and they survive quite a lot as well. And it's like, how much does it all really matter? Like that's one of the things of 3.0, because obviously a much more complicated formula will take a lot of investment time as well. So we kind of need to prove that it does make a significant change to the order of players before we can do anything. And I think it should. Like I've looked into eco numbers on Edge and things. We do know that the Letify round probability and Skybox economy numbers do make a big difference. Like we're not unaware of that. So that's just, yeah, that's the next step.
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, even if 2.1 is a hot fix, as someone who tries to like pick out demos for players to sort of semi-scout, it got really difficult actually trying to pick out demos where I knew I'd get quality. Like in CS2 with the shorter game lengths, more saving, like less deaths on certain player types. Sometimes you'd see a 1.6 rating, you'd watch the demo, you'd be like, yeah, 2 multi-kills the entire map. They just crushed them and he didn't die. And it got really like annoying. So I like this change because since then, you know, I've been watching, sure, mostly aggressive riflers since the update, but still I've been able to far more reliably get quality gameplay that actually shows me something when I get a high number on that rating than I did prior to this update, which was getting really annoying.
Yeah, I mean, it's still going to be an issue because the game's just so short. If you win like 13-3 and go 10-7, like you have a snacks game or something, like you are going to have a good rating. Like that's just fairly unavoidable, because if you're winning rounds and surviving still, like you have to give some value to it. It's just like that was one of the misconceptions about rating, is everyone thinks it's designed to average at 1 over like a map, or some people think it's like over like a player's whole career or something. Like it's always been an event. It's always been that amount of rounds. Like when we make the averages, it's literally designed over like players at events. Like that's how we get the averages. So it's still going to be a bit weird for that. So we, like at first we used like map to map averages, and then the results were ridiculous. Like we had like Munacy was like a 1.09 rating for the year because we used map to map averages, and we're just like, people are going to hate this so much. Like this can't be the solution. But then it became like over a map, like a 1.3 was really good, basically. And we're just like, we can't do this, because even though a lot of people asked for it, we can't do this. So it's still an event. I think that is better. So yeah, you're still going to get the odd case of that, but yeah, we are hoping it's more to do with killing an actual output, because you know, like there was even the stage in the process where I was like, can we just bin off survivor rating completely? But there's a reason it's there. It does still have a lot of value. As much as people don't like it, I think you do need it in a rating system. Same with KASD.
It inherently does bring into your next round, having a rifle that survived, increase your chance of winning that next round. Like it just does, and you have to give it something. But yeah, for me, it's always been my issue historically that I always brought up on shows was like, I have a survival rating, because I didn't know the separate ratings breakdown at this point. I was like, it felt like DPR was being rewarded twice, because in my head, the formula we built just very simply, your DPR would be a stat you'd be rewarded for, KAST would be a stat you'd be rewarded for. I didn't have this survival rating like formula in my head that you'd be calculating separately to then feed in. But I think with rating 3.0, are you going to be bringing back the sort of, because we used to have the round win probability slider sort of thing on HLTV. I'm pretty sure that's gone. Maybe I'm just oblivious. But is that going to be brought back and factored in? Because I feel like that's going to be a key to like determining kill value in the long term.
Yeah, so that actual that was not to do with round win probability. It was to do with like winning the map from a certain scoreline, I think is the one you're thinking of.
Yes,
like the one that said like it was underneath the scoreboard, right? But that was map win probability, and that was just like we just didn't. I mean, I want that back. I love that. But it's to do with map wins, and I don't know if the devs are confident enough, we've got enough data to do it, or if it's not a priority or something. I don't know, but I've pushed for that to come back. It will do at some point. It's just CS2 and MR12 was the reason that's gone. But yeah, in terms of the round win probability, I think that's a different kettle of fish in terms of how we do it. I doubt it will be some crazy AI model, because that's just harder, and we just have to hire like crazy people to do that. And I just don't think like it's too hard to apply that to something like HLTV rating. Like anytime soon, because it's like 2.1. Like we could have done more for 2.1, but it was more important to get it out quickly because 2.0 was pretty broken. Everyone knows it was pretty broken. Like the sub ratings were not equal anymore, right? So that was more the priority. And then for 3.0, it's going to be a similar case of I'm going to try and get all the probabilities and use that to make a formula, but it might not necessarily be like some AI model of player moves here and you're more likely to lose the round because you rotated off. Like that is something you need a demo for. I don't think we're going to be able to do crazy things like that. I think that's more something for like, I don't know, like an innovator who's more into these like super advanced stats. Because that's the one thing with HLTV rating is, yes, we want to be the best stat for it, but like you look at every sport and it's not going to be a sports, but it's not going to be ESPN making, expected goals. It's just not. It's clubs, data companies working for clubs, like true innovators who it's worth it to do crazy stuff like that because it's just like an investment of resources that just you don't really get back. Like, no one clicks on stats pages. It's basically like a loss leader almost to have a good rating. Like it's good for HLTV to have a good rating, but compare that to a team who's like scouting players or something. Like I can see why. Like if you had a data analyst, a data savvy analyst working for a team, I would make them make a rating that is custom for my team and scout using that. Like the Liquid guy, I don't think, because I've spoken to him, I don't think he has done this. But one of the first things to do would be I would make a rating system that uses demos because you can get so much more. And then I'd scout using his rating. I wouldn't, because I'm pretty sure people still just go on HLTV and sort by rating. Like that's not really who we're doing this for, as much as that is what happens.
Well,
you
it's
can
worse.
go
You've got
so
people
much
who
more
do
in
it off
depth.
of like
Right?
Faceit KD as well. Like I've heard from smaller teams who don't have HLTV access for the players they're looking at. They're talking near literally like we went in his Faceit profile, we looked through like 1,000 pugs basically, and the numbers are bonkers, so we tried them.
Yeah, it's like I can see why you do that. If there's no information that's better, because if you're just like a normal CS coach, you're not going to want to download 1,000 demos, chuck them in a pass, and be like, "Oh, what type of player is he?" Like that's too much effort. You're a coach. You just like it's too big. You're too busy to do that. Like data's job within a team sense, and I guess it's a bit of a tangent, but like within a team sense, it should be making the coaches and analysts' lives like way easier. And I think maybe doing that just makes it harder at first, at least, because you have to learn how to do it. But I do see that as the future. I think.
Yeah.
I don't think teams should be using KD or rating. I think they should have their own like bespoke systems.
Yeah, and maybe that becomes, well, maybe the data aspect of it becomes more of an analyst position because we already have teams with analysts who watch demos. Maybe they do start hiring one-off analysts to actually break down the game in the way you're describing. I do have a question that it sometimes comes up in my mind. Mostly it's related to util damage. So I made a video about this a long time ago at this point, explaining that the end of year, like HLTV always posted these like rankings, every team at the end of the year, like, which one did the most util damage. And it pissed me off because if you spammed Inferno as your pick, yeah, sure, you ended up with the most util damage. Good job, Big. You're geniuses. It always wound me up. So I tried adjusting it based on maps and you got some big shifts. But then I wondered, could you do this with everything? Like if a team plays a lot of Inferno, currently their survival ratings are going to be off the charts, just because a 3v5 on Inferno, done. It's over. That round's over on the CTs. If they've lost 2 players, they're giving up. Have you ever considered like essentially doing map meta adjustments for rating stats, or is it already a thing and I just don't know about it?
Yes, I'd love for it to be a thing. It's not a thing for 2.1 or 2.0, but like if you remember, people probably won't, but I did like a target rating for players, which is based on their positions.
I very much
and that is very much based on map to map averages. Like I just saw your video, I was fairly inspired by that actually. Because yes, the averages do change a lot based on each map. Like if you have overpass on Anubis and the CT averages are the same, like it is a bit weird. It is like it's just an unavoidable thing. It's a bit weird. So yeah, that is one thing. I haven't actually asked the devs about it. I don't know if it's possible, but I think it'd be much better to have map to map averages. The problem with that might be that you need to update the averages quite a lot. And then when you're looking back historically, do you update the averages for the new T-sided meta of, like Mirage or something? Mirage jumps to 60% win rate because someone finds something stupid. Like like an unrealistic example, or Valve change a map, right?
Yeah.
You then have to change the averages every time, whereas the averages we have across all the maps are much more stable and are pretty true for all of CS2. So I do want to see if it's possible, because you're right, it's just not fair. Like if someone plays like a team that perma-picks Anubis versus a team that perma-picks like a Nuke or something, like they are going to be playing harder T rounds and easier CT rounds, and that might even out, but also might not, because if you're picking it, you're playing the harder side as well more often. So it is a tricky thing to try and integrate, but I think it is important, because it's just about basically me proving that it's worth the effort. And I think if you see the averages across every map, like they are different enough that I'm hoping we can do that as part of 3.8. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, well, Quack, you got anything else nagging you? Because
No.
that was the big one for me. Like, I tried to casually talk about all the other stuff that I also had noted down. And I was like, for me, that still like lingers in my head, the numbers that came out of that video. Because I put way too much work into that for considering, like, I think back on it, I put so much time into that. I started that process by taking every single stat on an FTU page, comparing it to round win percentage, tracking which ones actually mattered. And then, because I was essentially trying to argue against someone that util stats are worthless for winning rounds, so people should stop going crazy about it. That was where it started. And so I went through a lot of work just to prove my point. And it just came out with that video, and I was like, this is something that's going to keep nagging at me. So if we can get it integrated, that'd be awesome.
Well, I'd agree with that. It's much more of a style thing, I think. Like a lot of those FTU stats are more about showing a team style than how good they are necessarily. And that's true of a lot of stats. And that's another thing that's hard with rating is, like, you want to reward flash assists, but then, like, it's just a function of like a role. Like, you're just going to throw the flashes in a default or get dropped 8 flashes around. And like, I guess you do need to be rewarded for it, but also like people just like Cadian's flash stats. Like, I could do a whole video on flash stats in the same way and just be like, look which flashes he's throwing. He's throwing the default flashes. He's not being some huge innovator. So it's the same thing. But yeah,
they're
that's
more
going to be my life for the next
while. Yeah, like on an individual basis, I've never found any value out of it. Whenever I look through flash stats for a player, I'm like, oh wow, IGLs, AWPers, and they're just spamming the living shit out of them. Like, of course they are. When you watch the demo, there's nothing really mind blowing.
Yeah, it's beta IGLs. You don't want to enter anymore. I'll throw the utility go. It's just entry. Stop sending your best players in.
Totally. We wish. But okay, well, thank you for joining us. We said we'd keep it brief. 20 minutes is perfectly within what the realms we were expecting. But yeah, thank you for coming on. Thanks for the insight. Do you know roughly when 3.0 can be expected, or are you not putting a timeline on it yet?
We can't put a time on it. We've not done enough to know anywhere near that amount of detail, because it just depends how complex a thing we end up having as well. We'll need help to change the game log and all sorts. Like, it's not going to be quick. That's why we did 2.1, is because it's probably not going to be that quick, but I'll try my best.
Yeah, all good. All good. Right. Thank you for coming on, and yeah, let's
pleasure. Thank you.
Let's catch up with the last 2 weeks, shall we? There's a lot more coming.
Yes, we have a fuck ton of things to talk about.
Yeah, awesome. Our first ever guest. A bit of an insight into the difficulties, I think, with tracking these numbers. And also, I think something that comes up for me a lot of the time when I have to talk about stats with people is the word objective gets thrown around a lot, but you just noticed how much there is actually subjective. What do you want to value? How do you want to value it? Why do you think this should be included and this shouldn't be? All of this, a lot of it comes down to subjectivity, and then just finding the right way around to actually doing it is the real logical conundrum. But okay, that's enough nerd talk, stats, formulae. Who cares? Let's talk about some heads getting shot off. IEM Rio, the first big event of our retake. There's a couple smaller ones, but we'll start with the one that everyone really cares about. Na'Vi, champions again. 6 grand finals in a row. Finally, 3rd victory. It's a bit awkward. But before we talk about the nitty-gritty of the actual event, I want to talk to you as the storyline guy. Is this a Na'Vi era?
No.
Yes, he's not against me for once. Yes. I don't have to bicker with him. Yes.
It's not another era.
Yeah, tell me your
I think
thoughts.
a couple of weeks ago they weren't even HLTV #1. I think Vitality were up to there just like a couple of weeks ago. Like it's I can't put this as a Navi era. They aren't. I mean, they are definitely the best team in the world right now. Yeah, it was 5 weeks ago. Vitality were #1. Like Navi are the best team in the world. I don't think they're significantly challenged by G2, and I think Vitality can't do it consistently. And Mouse, Spirit are sort of in a bit of a downfall, as our face, and the rest of the challengers just aren't really there yet to the point where they can consistently challenge for trophies. So Navi are relatively comfortably right now the best team in the world, but it's not an era. Like because I don't go. First of all, I think it's too short. Because I think the term era, like this is a term that we throw around, which I'm actually kind of tired of because it hasn't really been relevant for, in my opinion, 5 years. Like we haven't had an era. I guess like it's such a weird word as well. I'm not sure I like it. I think the last time you could properly call something an era was Navi 2021, and that was also relatively brief.
Yeah.
Yeah. So which is also like borderline, because then we start talking about if that's an era, then maybe Liquid 2019 is an era. And when people say Liquid era, I feel like that wasn't an era. Like,
No.
So I just think like the era teams we talk about, they are the teams who have like utter dominance. Like you go into an event and they will win. And the only way anyone else wins an event is if they aren't attending. Like that's basically it. That was what it was like with the 18-19 Astralis up until they stopped winning. And then they started again, but they weren't like when they started again, it wasn't like they weren't back to an era. I think like yeah. And then like yeah, you have other teams like that. You have yeah. But we have relatively few. Like that's kind of my bottom line here. And Navi aren't really there yet. Like I don't think it's a given that Navi win heading into any event. I would pick them as favorites for pretty much every event. Which is reasonable considering they're world #1. And they have the track record they have. But there is a difference. There's definitely a difference. FaZe in 2022. I see some people talk about FaZe era. That's not an era. Because they just weren't. They like for periods of the year they were clear of everybody else. I think you could reasonably call them the team of the year in 2022. I just don't like the best team of the year. It's just not an era because they didn't win. Like they weren't the big guys routinely enough. So yeah, I just have a really hard time with that word. It's not another era. They're doing very well, and Rio is another sign of that. And I think it's a very nice feather in the hat, which is very well putting them towards being team of the year, with just 2 more events to go.
2 events left, one of which is the major. And so this is my sort of take, and this is why I have bickered furiously with Liquid fans about their era definition. Because for me, it's about historical significance. And so not only do you, in my eyes, typically you have to win a major in your period of dominance for me to really give it to you as an era, you also need to rack up things like Colognes, Katowices. The major's the key tipping point usually for me, but no, you need to be truly dominant, but also winning the historically important events. And Navi won a major this year, you're right. They won it during the period where they were essentially a way worse team. Like they come into that major like 6th ranked in the world, or the event before it, 6th ranked in the world. Not a top team. The event before it, the 2 events after it, they either barely scrape playoffs or don't make playoffs at all. Like Pro League finishing 9th to 12th is technically a playoff spot, but we all know it's not really. It's not that big a deal. So no, they were struggling around that time. They fluked a major off the back of miracles by JL. Miracles. That's one of the most deserved MVPs of a major I've ever watched, despite his relatively pedestrian rating. That was insane. So no, for me it's not an era because yes, they've won 3 events of the last 6, and the other ones they finished 2nd. Really impressive, but they didn't win Cologne. And they haven't just smashed everything else in their sight. So it has been very difficult for me to come to terms with any Na'Vi era. If they go and win the major, we're having conversations about it again, and they're more realistic. They're more concrete at that point. But not winning the major, despite being not winning the major, and also not winning Cologne, not being completely dominant as the number one team, technically, is good, impressive, and they're on their way to winning a lot of money and having a lot of players in the HLTV top 10. For me, it's not quite reached that level.
I think even if they win the major, that major win has to be the start of something bigger for this to be a proper era. Because by definition, if we are comparing them to...
It gets hard to debate, though, doesn't it? Back-to-back major wins, 3 event wins in between. It does get hard to debate with people who want to call it an era, doesn't it? It gets really difficult.
Yeah, it's just... Yeah, it does, but I think that major win then has to be the start of something bigger. Like, it has to be the start of something bigger. Because even then, I think, yeah, they made 6 straight finals. But they made 6 straight finals.
I know what you're struggling to articulate. It's because the eye test isn't screaming dominant. The finals are close.
Yeah.
They're not dumpstering people left, right, and center. They don't have a Simple on their team. They don't have a Get Right in Forest. They don't have a Prime Fnatic core. They don't have Astralis' insane tactical and mechanical dominance. They're close to it. They're approaching it. They're on the same sort of they're in that same boat, I guess, but they're not quite driving it home. And we watch the games, we know they're winning, we accept that they have the best IGL coach duo potentially we've ever seen, but there's something missing in the eye test that makes you believe that. Because I love the way you're just saying these things, then you're like, I feel like what we're missing here is an eye test. That's what we're short of.
What I feel like is if they were to win the major and then next season it's the Spirit year or whatever, and Na'Vi just aren't there, then this is not an era, because this entire thing is just a prelude to the era. That's kind of what I feel like. Because they haven't gone straight out and been like crazy like all throughout. I wouldn't look back on this period as an era unless they start winning even more consistently. Unless they start being that unbeatable team. If they can string together a couple of events in a row, then maybe, yeah, I would consider the past 3 months an era. I just have a hard time with it right now.
That's fine. Should we move on to other topics at this event, though?
I just want to make one comparison because it's one of my favorite teams. 6 finals in a row. Mouse 2019 had 5 finals in a row, and that's a team that very few people would talk about being anywhere close an era. And they won.
How many did they win?
I think they won 3 or 4. I think they won a fuck ton. As I recall. Hang on.
If my recollection is correct, I believe they won 2 in 2019. 2 big events.
Yeah, Na'Vi won 3. So what's the?
There's one more. There's one more. There's if the major comes along, that's the conversation. But let's talk about other Counter-Strike teams.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we're just going to debate this for a long time. Let's start.
They won 3, just to note.
Okay, that's good.
But although CS Summit is one of them. Yeah.
CS Summit doesn't count. Furia make the playoffs, and for me, as not a Furia hater, more a Furia frustrated at her, because let's be honest, you've had the best rifler in your nation's history for 5, 6, 7 years now. It's been forever, and you haven't done a damn thing really with him. And he's just given you another example of, please save me, someone. Ridiculous run to the playoffs from Queserato. Once in the playoffs, they got absolutely diffed by Mouse. 13-3, 13-3 on stage. Torji with a 2.08. Y'all got absolutely annihilated. But in the groups, beating FaZe in a BO1, everyone looks at that, doesn't sniff. Just like, all right, yeah, whatever. BO1, it happens. 2-1 against Mouse. Queserato going ballistic. You start thinking, okay, you've made playoffs. Then to just rub it in, you beat Na'Vi 2-0 with another insane Queserato performance. You think, okay, this is great, but the way it falls apart after that, sobering. Kind of leaves you with a bit of a pit of like, oh, they're still wasting Queserato, aren't they? They're still not really appreciative of what they have. And I don't know, how do you rate this run? Because it's impressive to make top 4, despite it being straight from the group. But they did get absolutely bodied once they got there. They looked fraudulent once they got on stage.
I rate the run. I think the run is kind of cool. They do play some decent teams. They have to beat FaZe, which is, as much as we talk, like they're on a bit of a downfall. And also it's an opening matchup. But it's that's still an impressive scap. They beat Mouse, as much as they're also on a bit of a downturn. That's still an impressive scap, especially for a team like Furia. And then they beat Navi in what is a seeding game, but they do it still. Well done. And then they have the Mouse repeat and they get absolutely dumpstered. That's it's still an impressive run. It wasn't like they got a freebie. Like, it's not like they played the same teams that Vitality played. They played 9Z and Mongols. It's not like that. Even Heroic, I think after winning against G2, they play Astralis, which is a relatively easy matchup compared to some other teams attending. So I do rate the Fury run. What I will say though, like something interesting about Keiserota this year is that it's actually been a very bad year for him, like by his own standards.
Yeah. I brought this up, sorry, just to jump in. I brought this up on the double swing when we previewed this event. Keiserota, a lot of his rep this year, and it feels like for the last couple of years, has been built off his old self. Like his current self has been more of a 1.08 type of, like, occasionally big performances and nothing game sort of guy. Like he's really been whatever-y. But no, this is a massive change, but it does bring up the old narrative of playoff Keiserota. Not really as impressive in a lot of these recent events.
Because the point, I brought up the stats sheet to check this, because I was like, oh, this performance might put Keiserota back in the top 20, because, Fury have been fucking nowhere, but this performance might put them in the top 20. I'm not even sure that's true, because this is like the first... He's had a 130 rated event before, it was the EPL, but they went out quite early. They went out before playoffs. Otherwise, like Esports World Cup, I think the format is kind of speaking against them there, considering they make it into the playoffs in a bit of a bullshit way. They didn't have to play anybody particularly. They played Navi and lost, and then they played FlyQuest, Sashi, and the Mongols to make it into the playoffs in best of ones. What the fuck is this event? And then he had like shit events. He was crap at the major. To be by his own standards, he was crap at the major. He was bad in Chengdu. He was bad in Chengdu, which is absolutely a team where I would have picked Furia to make playoffs, considering the sort of tenure of teams who were there. But a bunch of the big teams skipped Chengdu. They didn't make playoffs. Should definitely have made playoffs in EPL. Jesus Christ. Esports World Cup, whatever. Cologne, dumpstered, last place. Shit performance from Keiserota, 0.45 KPR. And then, EPL is back. He's half decent. They make the first playoff game. And then Rio, they make this run, and he's amazing. I think he might be in, but I also think he might be out. Like, I just think it wasn't a particularly impressive run. But yeah, he's still by far and away the best rated player in big events on Furia this year. So wasting Keiserota, but less so than before, I think.
This is a nice run. I think if you're Furia, you feel a bit optimistic about the level you got out of like Skulls in the Navi series especially, but generally you've gotten a decent performance out of Skulls in a lot more games than, or certainly Liquid ever did. But I'm still worried. I'm still thinking, could we get Insani out of MIBR? Would that be our solution moving forward? Do we just say, fuck it, we need to dump a bunch of cash into actually making the best possible Brazilian team? Like, it'll probably cost you like $1 million plus to just get like Biguzera and Insani. But at what point do you start thinking about that? Because is it good enough to just be the most popular team in Brazil? Not necessarily the best, the most popular. That's their debate. I guess some teams are happy with just the popularity. Next team that really needs to be spoken about, Mouse, make a grand final. We talked about the downturn. You even touched on it after their group stage loss to Furia there. But in the playoffs, 2-1 Vitality, 2-0 Furia in disrespectfully dominant fashion. And then 3-1 loss to Navi with only one weak map. Like, they lose Dust 2 13-2, but everything else was either close or they won. So, the Mal's stage narrative probably has to be shot in the head like a broken-legged horse, but they are still scary. I think some people started counting them out, started saying they were falling off the cliff. Finally, the youth, the inexperience was catching up to them. They need to be like essentially split up. Everyone can take pieces and upgrade their teams, but the Mal's experiment with these young boys is over. They might still get taken to pieces, but I still think they're dangerous till the end of the year. Like, they have a chance at the major, a dark horse chance to win it entirely. And Yimfat, I called him a new type of superstar. I still stand by that statement. Like, so much value from that position. I think Mouse are a really underrated team. What's your take on this run for them? Are they back, or are you still kind of on the low?
Any viewers who want to check me after, I think it would have been the ESL Pro League elimination where they kind of went kind of bad. Didn't make playoffs. Coming out of that group where they definitely should have. They lost twice to Complexity in that event. I think I said at that point that, like, well, yeah, I think Mouse can still, or somewhere around there on this show, I said that, yeah, I think Mouse, like, what are the odds of Mouse splitting up? What are the odds of Mouse, sticking together past the end of the year? It might have been somewhere else, actually. But I think I said, yeah, if they have a grand final appearance at IEM Rio and maybe playoffs at the major, I think they can stick together and try to make a year out of 2025 as a team. They made a grand final in Rio. Like, yeah, I think that's good. I think Mouse are like, it isn't free fall. I think a lot of other teams we talk about free fall, where it's just like they are just fucking going down. It just keeps going down. There's no up and down, slowly trending down. It was just straight down. And Mouse, they were, or I feel like they didn't really drop too far. I think they sort of caught themselves at the top 5 mark. And then, they had the bad EPL. People start talking about people have to leave Mouse. Now they're back. Their run is very impressive. This is especially with the crowd narrative. I think you have to remove that now, because this is not even the first event where they have decent performances in front of a crowd, and this is a scary crowd. This is the fucking Rio de Janeiro crowd. So especially against Furia. So, like, I think you need to get rid of that narrative now, which becomes another challenge for them. Like, there's no more excuses. If they want to be the best team in the world, they now have to be the best team in the world. There's nothing to say like, oh, they could have won this event, but it was in front of a crowd, or those sort of things. So yeah, it's a very good run from us.
Yeah, I'm impressed. Still loving it. Still think, yeah, the discussion, the AWPA debate has kind of leaned into Wonderful in this second half of the year. I still want to see a comeback from Torji. I'm a huge fan of Torji's game, because when he's on, I don't think anyone plays more fun Counter-Strike out of the non-elite top AWPers. Like, there's the elite 2. Yeah, literally 2. And then everyone else is in the next sort of group, in the, what's it called? The peloton. He's the most fun of them. And I really hope he can keep it up. Like, keep grinding up, keep making those runs, and keep making those big performances. Next note, really, that I want to talk about. Heroic. A team I picked at this event, like in my preview, and I said, in theory, this group of players should be way better. And we'd seen flashes promising something, but never had they really delivered. They make top 4, so they make it straight out the group, which is already like a bit of a, I hate this format at IEM events where you can just be top 4 because you won a group. Like, I'm like, this is a bit odd. Like, give me a fucking 8-team playoff bracket. But yeah, they make it. And then they take a map off Na'Vi, and they take Dust 2 to overtime, and finally end up losing Mirage, but they gave it one hell of a game. Like, Na'Vi were not comfortable in that game until they managed to finally close it on map 3. That could have been a 2-0. Dust 2, it was an incredible comeback by Na'Vi to make it happen. I believe they were down a good amount, like at least 9-3 at half. I don't remember where it ended up before the comeback started. But no, an absolutely incredible match. And Heroic, I think, showing what this roster promised. When it first starts coming together, you think this team should be able to bounce up to the top. Like, sure, you've still got Shush and Tessus, who are just solid role players for Heroic. But then you bring in Nertz, a star. You bring in Dexter, a former star Rauper. You've got an IGL. They should be doing better. And this first event, what they actually do. Do you believe this is real, Quack? Is this Heroic actually ready to be an elite team again?
If they win Espoo today, they are definitely in the contention for Shanghai playoffs. Definitely. Then I would definitely put them in the top 10 space. And yeah, like as you said, I think this group of people should be a lot better. I think something has just clicked. I can't remember this verbatim, but I think somebody said something similar in an interview at some point around IEM Rio. Like, yeah, like something is just clicking a lot better right now with these players. and I'm happy about that. I do have sort of a soft spot for heroic still. I also, this run is also legit. Like, they play good teams and they beat them. I mean, the G2 win is a best of one, and also it's G2. I suppose we're talking about G2 a little bit later as well.
We will. Yeah.
They beat Astralis. That's a good game. Very nice little revenge game. I casted that one with Ludi on Twitch. They honestly, they had their stumbles. There were times when Astralis looked like they had control of the game, and then they just absolutely, the scoreline is still pretty one-sided for heroic. So yeah, well done. And then they beat Vitality, also in a seeding game. Like, it's that's has to be taken into account, but it's still very important because of the format. Like, for Vitality, I don't think they would have known it at the time, but that winning that game was the difference between playing Navi or playing Furia. So yeah, I think they are, sorry, no, they would have been in the grand final. Either way, they don't make it there. So, like, it's well done. It's very well done. But they fall in the end against Navi. Even though they win a map, there. Like,
yeah,
they play
map,
overtime.
OT map too. Like, it's a damn good try.
Yeah, it's a very good try. It could have been a 2-0 for heroic for sure. It's absolutely feasible. But yeah, I think it's a legit run, which puts them into the top 10. Ranking just about reflects that. They're 11th right now. I think with Espoo, they're going to break into the top 10, especially considering, Virtus Pro are top 10. It's a very good run. And I think it bodes very well leading into the RMR, like, just in time they've started doing this. And then they have these kind of smaller events. They have Espoo. They also have the Thunder Pick World Championship, which is online to start and then moves into LAN. An interesting event. So they have, I'm actually just briefly going to check their group. Yeah, they definitely should win their group. They have Imperial, NIP, and Legacy. And when they win that group, they play play-ins where they probably play like similar level teams, 9C, Mongols, M80, Aurora, Falcons, VP, probably one of those guys. Then they move into LAN finals, and that's where they can, I do believe this is a studio event in Berlin. They play they're gonna play some very fucking big money. The final, like, the winner of this event gets fucking $500,000. So that's huge. But they have these two small events leading into the RMR. They do well at the RMR. I could see a heroic 3-0. Like, I could. They get straight into the legend stage. They play Shanghai. They make playoffs. I think that's a good cap off to the year for them. And that's the point where I think that this group of players who are very good could start challenging for being top 5. And I'm gonna say again, because this is like a core which on 2 different accounts or 3 different accounts even have been challenging that top 5 space before.
Yeah, no, that makes reasonable sense to me. Finally, our last topic for IEM Rio, I think it has to be.
This is gonna be a long one.
Is it going to be long? G2.
The episode, I mean, the episode.
Oh, the episode, yeah, because G2, yeah, they lose that opening BO1 to heroic. They 13-10 on Dust 2. Dust 2 should really be a hunting ground for G2. I've said this for a while. It was a bit weird that they never leaned into it. But here they play it in a BO1 as sort of supposed to be a middle ground map, and they just lose it. Fairly close, fair enough. Then they go on to play Eternal Fire in a best of 3, and they get absolutely fucking clapped. They get casting couched. They get whatever you want to call it. They got destroyed.
Womp womp.
It wasn't fun. I'm going to be honest. I watched it. I was like, m0NESY scrapping for his life. Like, he ends up with the second most kills in the entire series. But what on earth happened to Nico? That was horrific. I mean, sure, you players have bad events. This was his worst event of all time.
Yep.
And I think for the mental, that's got to be horrible. Because if you're G2, you're like, yeah, we won an event. Look at us now with our IGL decisions. Suck it, everyone. Just to go into the next event and just look like bottom feeders. An abysmal showing.
Yep.
So I basically asked this, going into the Blast Premier World Final, do we have a single clue what to expect from G2? Are they in any way predictable to you, or is it just going to be a case of whatever G2 shows up on the day decides everything? Is it just a Nico decides it? Like, if he wins the game, he wins the game? Or?
I don't think it's Nico decides it, because I think m0NESY, It's 3 maps we're talking about, so the ratings you can't really speak about. But I think also the other people on G2, while they didn't really show up in Rio. Like Hunter Mobs, as much as this was Nico's worst event of all time, they also didn't really have that sort of performance where they can be. And that definitely probably would have helped their odds. Going into Blast World Final, I think it's very much going to depend on the day because they have a tough group. They have a Liquid series to start, which is very losable if they play bad, but very winnable if they play good. And then they have either Vitality or Spirit. And in that game, I would definitely pick G2 to lose unless Nico is back to like the proper level. I think the implications of a bad Nico performance at World Final as well, though, are going to be huge because then we're talking about a potentially very bad finish to the year. He goes to Falcons, and it's sort of it could be huge. Like the implications of that could be very huge, especially with Rio in mind. But I do think it is a one-off. I think that maybe Nico isn't the kind of guy to string together 2 bad events in a row, like ever. And that this was the worst ever. Well, I think that's a technicality as well. Like I think it's a nice little gimmicky point to make. Because it's a bad event. That's pretty much what it is. There's not too much more to it. He's had bad events in the past as well. He's had ESL1 New York. He's had a couple of these Blast Pro Series things where he didn't do too hot. He's had IEM Sydney, Berlin Major. Like there's a bunch of ones. And I think he's gonna swing back in World Final. And about Rio, womp womp, G2 shit. They are gonna be very up and down, I think. I think that's sort of basically what their team is. Like they are very up and down. They're banking on the peaks. And I think they've been doing that for like the past year. Even with Hooksy, they were sort of banking. I think they were sort of banking on having very high highs and very low lows. Or at least that was what was showed. Adding stacks is not going to do any favors. That it's going to be exactly the same thing. So yeah, this was one of the very low lows.
It was. I mean, his worst event, technicality, his worst KPR by a long shot as well. Like just abysmal showing. So yeah, that sort of wraps up the G2 side of it. Not too much to add. Yeah, they are always going to be very heavily fluctuating. You know, when they had Hooksy, they also had Nexa in this year, and it was just if the 2 guys at the top can carry hard enough, it doesn't matter. If they can't, all of a sudden it's a big issue. So yeah, expect a lot more of that. But let's move on to our small site retakes. I'm going to take the lead on this one quickly, just to start off with a very tier 2 topic. 500. Formerly the kings of tier 2, essentially this sort of Bulgarian core. Currently, the team looks a little different than what it used to. Back when they were literally, and I mean literally, out-earning tier 1 teams by winning tier 2 cups. They had Bubble as their IGL. It was a bit of a different vibe, but currently the roster is Spellan, Cirque, Ships, Rainwaker, Oxygen. So technically, Oxygen hasn't played in this sort of team, like this Bubble, Rainwaker sort of sphere, since they were Skada. Like, he's been out in the wilds for a long time. But the core duo, Ships and Rainwaker, are back together. They've been winning quite a lot of games. I mean, they made it out of Yala contenders. They're winning games in A1 Gaming League. They've been, historically, like in the past 6 months since reuniting, they've been very down, very weak. But they finally found a pocket of form, so I want to bring them up just because you heard it first. The Kings of Tier 2 are coming back. Sure, they probably won't qualify for the big events. They'll struggle to really make an impact into Tier 1. But with Cirque on the AWP, who's been kind of smurfing in a lot of the games they play, his rating may not be reflective of that, but the games I've watched, he's been smurfing. Rainwaker back to being the king of the clutch in Tier 2. They're going to start winning these CCTs. They're going to start winning these Thunder Picks, these other little cups, and racking up that prize money. So don't be surprised if you see it come back again. The 500 earning train, the Bulgarian Tier 2 kings, I think are coming back with a vengeance.
It's a big prediction.
It's huge. It's ridiculous given their form, but yeah.
Yeah. I watched these guys when they played Molotov Gaming in Advanced, and the lead up to that game, they were very bad. They lost to a lot of teams that even on paper they shouldn't lose to. The Gaming is Molotov, they also lose.
Yep.
Honestly, it's a 3-mapper, but it was honestly fairly comfortable, especially on the last map, 6-13. No contest. They have a nice little run here. Like, they have a bunch of wins here in a row, which is nice. It's also not opposition, which makes me hugely excited. But I'd be happy if they came back. I like some of the players, especially now with some of the other players gone from this team. Some of the other players who, for various reasons, I don't very much enjoy. Players like Bubble, well, don't very much for various reasons. Is I don't like them because they match fixed, and I know this. Not these guys, but some of the guys who were there on this team before, or other Bulgarian teams were these players. Anyway. Bubble and those guys. I don't like Bubble. There's I'd be happy if they came back, basically. I like 500. I like their the players. I like Ships. I like Cirque. I like Rainmaker. It's a combination where I think, honestly, at one point or another, probably all of these players could have featured on a top 20 team. Some of them have. Cirque and Rainmaker, notably. Ships as well, I think, would have won top 20 at some point. With
He did hit top
I-
20 under Windigo. He did.
Yeah, Wendigo. Oxygen, I think that point might still be in the future, but yeah, he's a good player. Yeah, good team, and I'd be happy to see it click. But yeah,
Yeah, it's a bit of a
let's see
dream,
how it goes.
realistically, but
Yeah.
I'm a fan.
Yeah. If I should lead off, if I should go ahead with my own pick. A funny thing happened in North American ESL Challenger League. I'm sure something really funny happened in North Korean Counter-Strike as well. It wasn't really funny. It was actually horrible. A lot of players were impacted by DDoS attacks. A lot of players. So it started out with Wildcard, Susp, Fuzi, Sonic, and Jaba were impacted by huge DDoS attacks all throughout their game against. I'm forgetting who they played. They still won the game. I can't remember. The game they played before NRG. I have to look this up. They got DDoS hugely. They took a fuck ton of tech pauses. Boss. It was against Boss. They took their tech pause until their time ran out. Boss took their tech pause until that time ran out. Sonic basically went to his girlfriend's house because she has gigabit internet and fiber connection. Still, wasn't working out. Like, nothing was happening. Like, nothing was working. Admins didn't want to do anything about it, so they just had to play through it. It was DDoS attacks. And then in a later game, Party Astronauts versus Nouns, players on both sides were being DDoSed. In that game, actually the same round. Or actually, sorry, the later round. And here the interesting thing is that Junior, Dust2 US reported about this, and I wrote about their report. Junior is very much confident that it has to do with CCT in their North American circuit having invited a bunch of players to their own TeamSpeak server, which means their IP is accessible through that sort of server data. And the only people who joined that CCT TeamSpeak on Nouns were the exact same two players who were affected by the DDoS attacks. The other three weren't, so presumably their IPs weren't directly accessible. And same thing with Wildcard. They have also played in that circuit of events. They would have been in that same thing. Basically, everybody thinks that is the root cause of it. So CCT, in another very interesting move, is especially in North America. I just got jump scared because I got a battery notice on my headphones. Especially in North Korea. I keep saying North Korea. It's just because we talked about Talk 2 behind the scenes. CCT in North America, they've done some fucking shitty things. Especially they. Look, I just talked to M&M's off of Dust2 US fame. There's a team there which definitely shouldn't be there. They presumably, supposedly, they have been leaking the IPs of players to angry bettors who want to influence the odds of their games so they can DDoS them and try to force a loss and win their own bet through their TeamSpeak server. So that's fun. Thank you, CCT, for what you do for the Tier 2 circuit.
Brilliant. What a cheery note to end on. Speaking of things that are actually kind of funny, Elisa Masters Espoo. Formerly pronounced Espoo by some people who Never looked up the pronunciation and thought, just call it Helsinki and move it 6 meters to the right, but whatever. Yeah. For my Americans out
Do you
there,
think they do?
what?
Do you think they do it on purpose, like host it in Espoo just because people think the Espoo name is funny? Like, do you think that's
do not think
the
so.
thing?
I think they are Finns, and they just think, what is funny about Espoo? They don't think twice about it. But yeah, if Americans will know this reference, Espoo is essentially the Fort Worth to Helsinki's Dallas. They are one metropolitan area, realistically.
Yep.
But they're on the Espoo side, so they're going to call it that. Whatever, that's fine. I've learned how to say it correctly. Look at me, the linguist, the cultured man, the world traveler. Anyway, let's talk about this event because it's currently ongoing. Obviously, it first made headlines due to the very controversial decision to have the evil trio of Richard Lewis, Thorin, and Maui Snake as the analyst desk combo. I didn't get the fuss, but whatever. The internet is full of children who care way too much about silly things. In reality, all it's meant has been a lot of banter on a desk with an empty crowd, and even when the crowd filled up, no reaction. I'm going to be honest, I was listening on broadcast, I was like, is there a different in-arena sound? Like, are the crowd hearing Finnish stuff? It might be the case, because they seemed very unbothered by anything said on the desk. But let's talk about the Counter-Strike played, because there was Counter-Strike played. Ninjas in pajamas, playing with a stand-in. I'm sure you might have more insight than I do as to why JoeCab was playing in the place of Maxter. You don't? Brilliant. Yeah, they end up going straight home, losing to Bait in overtime, and then 2-1 to Jano, which
was funny.
Yeah, even with a stand-in, guys. Even with a stand-in. Wrinkle continues to frustrate me, and NIP continue to disappoint me. Any saving grace from this event, Quacke, or is it just an absolute loss for the Ninjas?
The saving grace is it's a bunch of close games. Like, they play good games. I think they do still play fairly decent games as this event. They play like both maps, and like it's really only the final map against Jano, which I think is, well, honestly, no, okay, the entire Jano series was shit, but they play a close game against Bait that ends up in overtime. They have a substitute for a medical emergency. It was fairly, I don't know what it is, but Maxter was set to play the event, and then an unforeseen medical hurdle of some sort forced JoeCab to play instead. They have missed them for the first time as the IGL. Presumably, they had prepped a lot with Maxter. Now they kind of have to throw that out of the window. They still make overtime against Bait, who are eventually a playoff team. And that Jano series, it should be closer, but it's also like they don't practice, as far as I know, because I'm pretty sure Ariel and X7 literally just jumped into this team for the Copenhagen major qualifier and then just stuck around because both of them were retired at that point. So I don't think these guys practice very much. I think they made it through the Finnish qualifier and they just made the most of it. I think it is difficult playing against a team like that to a degree, where it's like there are no reads to make, there's nothing to prep. You just have to go out and try to play your game, and that can be especially be very difficult when you yourself don't have much of a game. Like when you're missing a player, you have a fresh IGL. A lot of things are new. It's still shit. They still should win this game. And especially considering how close it is. Like, I might have understood it more if Jano had like blown them out 13-7, 13-8, 2-0. At that point, I might have thought, well, it's a bad day. They have a stand and all of this. They still bring it close enough where I feel like they should win the key rounds. Like, they should take those final 2 rounds to close the map. Like, they should do that. But they don't, unfortunately. It was quite funny, to be honest. Especially, they had big leads. Like, they had a big lead on Nuke. They had a big lead on Dust 2, and they threw it. So yeah, I didn't like it. Like, I won't say that much, but I did think it was a little bit funny watching. Nice storyline that they lose to 2 of their ex-oppers at the same event. In Alu and Hedrick. And yeah, and then Jano, they play Mongols and they don't do very well, as I recall. Yeah. Sorry, they play Bait in the final game. Yeah, they didn't do
Bait
particularly
summarily
well.
crushed them. Because
Yeah, they had a
Jano,
13-11
for crying out loud. No, I mean NIP. There's no excuse. Honestly, this was just atrocious. Very disappointing.
I would say this:
and
a
depressing.
lot of people went. A lot of people went. It's time to blow up the team again and try to do something new. And I was like, "Holy shit, dude! They have played 6 maps and none of them with Maxter since changing their IGL. Like it's grim. Like they should make changes yet. I think no matter what, they're locked into this lineup at least until the middle of November when they maybe get knocked out of the RMR. If they make it through the RMR, they're locked into it until 2025. We are going to see at least like 25, 30 more maps of this roster, hopefully with Maxter. That's when I'll judge them. For now, that's just funny.
Yeah, that's fair. It does make me question, if you can't out-talent Jano, what the hell can you do in the long term? But hey, maybe they are such a power of friendship, yeah, type team that Maxter being away means they are incapable of moving their right wrist. So no, let's move on to teams who are good at Counter-Strike. Notably, ENCE. Surprisingly, but notably, ENCE first debut with their new lineup. And they figured out how to play Counter-Strike. Casper Sky, NER0 added really close to this event. Like, I missed it entirely. Turns out it was over the weekend I was away. But yeah, they barely had much time to prep, but they come in and outstanding performances from OD, NER0, Casper Sky, even SDY, I believe, had a decent showing. I think Glaive might have been good in a BO1.
He was.
Everything went swimmingly for them. This is exactly the debut they wanted from their new lineup. I think I had some reserved optimism because I liked the players they'd added. I liked Casper Sky, and especially like NER0 as a signing for them. The fact that they've come here, made the grand final, not just make playoffs. They are, in that grand final, a rematch with Heroic after beating Mongols, who at this kind of event are pretty much a grand final lock historically. Like, they don't always win them. They'll occasionally lose to an upstart team who are there. But to beat them 2-1 in playoffs is amazing. I mean, a terrible Mirage showing from ENCE, but everything else went exactly according to plan. Pody, huge. NER0, outstanding. What a debut. Do we believe in this roster? Like, is this finally now an ENCE we can start being fans of again? I mean, I never lost hope in the organization entirely, but I was getting pretty depressed during the Polish plus Glaive era. Like, post Katowice, it was very ugly.
Ask me again after the final.
Even
honestly,
then, I mean,
if
I
they
don't care
win
if they
this,
lose that.
that's
like,
legit.
You play
No,
Heroic,
actually, yeah, you
you
might be
shouldn't
right
win.
about that. Yeah, yeah,
They
you might be right
shouldn't
about that. I think they've done really well. I think that ENCE game is very well done as well. Or sorry, the Mongols game. That's very well done. They played close in the group stage game against Heroic. They played close. Like that's a close game, which makes me believe that I think maybe they can do it. They don't, fall to the revenge curse that some people sometimes have, where like you play a game, you play a team in the opening matchup of a group stage, then stuff happens, and you come back and play them again and you lose. It's they don't do that. They beat ENCE. They beat 9C 3 times pretty comfortably. Yeah, I think it is kind of legit. I think it's definitely a feather in the hat for Casper Sky and NER0. They don't have the huge stars. Like, that's something to note. Like, nobody here, they're doing fine. SDY and Pody, they're doing, where probably their peak performance on this team should be. 17 and 15, like 117, 15. There are much bigger stars at this event. Heroic have 4 players in the top 6.
Yeah,
they don't have those sort of big superstar performances that we've somehow seen out of Shush in these first 5 maps. But they're doing very well with what they have, and I think everybody's putting in a very respectable performance on the ENCE team. We have, like I said, Casper Sky and NER0 putting up a very solid, if nothing else, a very solid floor in this event. So yeah, I think they are starting to be a little bit more legit. I think it's probably the best ENCE roster we've seen in a while. I'm not sure. I assume OnKJ is also doing a lot with that. They have the coach change. They've swapped out 2 players who historically weren't doing particularly hot, Kyler and Goofy. Yeah, I think they've made a good shuffle, and I think they've gone for exactly the kind of players that ENCE do go for, NER0 and Casper Sky, historically. And I think they've done very well. And I mean, it's the recovery from doing the sort of RMR shuffle, trying to get into the RMR after losing your sort of best roster of all time almost. To nice recovery. So good luck in the final. And I might be cheering for you.
Yeah, I hopefully can cash that game. I mean, I don't know how busy I'll be today.
It's a best of 5. You'd probably catch one map.
It's a best of 5?
Yeah, it's a best of 5.
Who
And that
asked
arena is
for
going to be
this?
hot, man. We have ENS on one hand, and then we also have SAW on the other hand. Like, that crowd is probably going to be big. I think they were loud enough in the Mongols game. And I really liked how like Pody was playing off of that crowd. That's going to be crazy. Yeah, it's going to be a best of 5. It's starting at 4.
Yeah, I've
And,
seen the time. Oh my god. I mean, sorry, at 6 o'clock I'm turning it off, but until then,
they have the same permaban. They have Inferno, and I think ENS are going to get the first pick. Last time they played at this event, ENS banned Mirage, so I think we're going to see those kind of maps. They actually did Vertigo. ENS barely play Vertigo. That was only their second Vertigo map in the past 3 months. They still picked Vertigo into Heroic in the group stage game, so I think we can see some funny veto stuff for this. But yeah, it's a best of 5, so we're probably going to see like every map except Inferno and Mirage.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Enjoy that game. I'm not going to dwell too long on this event because we have so many more events to talk about. Sure, there are other storylines. Oh no, Mongols, what happened? Wow. Yeah, all that kind of stuff, but I'm not too bothered. Let's talk about ESL Impact League. Look at us. Feminists.
Yeah.
Right. So the ladies have been playing Counter-Strike, and basically the season, like the regular season portion, is over. It's been completed. And we have our teams pretty much determined for the finals, except for 2 European slots, which are yet to be
1 European
concluded.
Wait, what? What is
it's still 2.
Oh,
so technically, Dreamcatchers will have to beat someone, I think.
No, they are qualified. They just
then why are they not listed
just yet? Probably just the admins didn't put it in yet. I am gonna send that to them right now. We have one game left, and it's gonna be either Navi Javelins or Let Her Cook.
Right,
Let Her Cook, finalists of last season. Navi Javelins, underperformers of last season, but they made big shuffles.
Right. So the teams at the finals: Furia FE, FlyQuest at Red, as if anyone else was going to come out of the North American section. Fluxo Demons, Imperial FE, another shocker. NIP Impact, Big Equipa, and despite not being listed, Dreamcatchers FE should be on there. And we await the decision, as you said, the game between Let Her Cook and Navi Javelins. Firstly, just to touch on that qualifying game, surprised Navi Javelins have had to go down to the qualifiers. I mean, they're such an OP roster on paper, but losing to NIP Impact in the group and then somehow losing the Dreamcatcher series, I didn't think they'd lose that, has stuck them here.
I'm gonna remind you of something. Why Navi Javelins didn't win the group. They would have won the group
if they hadn't lost to NIP Impact. Yeah.
If they hadn't forfeited the third map at a 10-7 score due to technical difficulties.
Oh, geez, I forgot that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tech loss. So
that has huge implications. If they lose today, that has huge implications.
Damn, well, they were down 10-7, but still, like, that's a big one. So yeah, lose 2-0 to Dreamcatchers, not expecting that. But Let Her Cook, who were third in the group, Navi Jam's already beat them. They were the finalists last season, but there's a big difference here. Their best player at the finals last time was Rachel, French player, who then left the team. There's something to be said about that. Like, they're not quite the same unit that we saw last time. But neither are Navi Javelins. They made some changes, some big shuffling in terms of signing D7 and Astra. So I'll be curious to see how this game goes. I expect Navi Javelins to win and then to conclude the team list. But I guess you never actually know, do you? Until the games are actually played.
Yeah. It's been a group stage, which I think has been decently predictable. Like, it's ENS Athena, I probably would have hoped they would do better, but I also, with the competition they had, I think they realistically kind of are where they are. I think Astralis W probably should have won maybe one more game. Maybe the game against Spirit FE they should have won. Yeah. let her cook in Navi Javelins and NIP Impact. I think that was a big stacked sort of peak of this Group B sort of draw. And then on the other side, Imperial sweep the group, bigger keep up. They do good. HSG, I think probably should have done better, but yeah. Dreamcatchers, like the big team that I kind of want to touch on here, and I tweeted about this just a couple of minutes ago because I scheduled that beforehand. They have an interesting core. They have F6 Tal, which is Fatal, and Elizabeth, who were previously not of One Win Gang, as I thought they were. They were of Nine Pandas, which actually was a good team. But then they also have the core of this team is Forza Ladies, who I'm just, like, there's no sugarcoating it. They were kind of dog shit. They didn't do anything. They failed in the open qualifier for season 5, I think. They didn't make it through. Did Forza Ladies. They did play the cash cups. They did half decent. I think maybe they won one. No, they lost. They lost to NIP Impact. They weren't particularly good. Now they basically swapped 2 players for Nine Pandas players who were fairly decent. And
they're good players.
Yeah, and they've done really well. They've made it into the finals. And the interesting thing is, it's not even like they've brought in, Fatal is like hard carrying this team. She's the worst rated player on the team. I assume she is the caller. Like I would assume she is the caller.
If my memory is correct, she is, yes.
Yeah. It's actually the Forza Ladies, 2 of them, who have stepped up and put up the big ratings. It's Vienne who's done 116. Like even Elizabeth, she's up there. She's 108, but it's not like it's not her firepower coming in and making this team what it is. Like that's not particularly it. It's like I would assume it's more Fatal bringing something good out of this team. So well done. I don't have big hopes for them in the actual final, I think, but I do think they've put up an impressive season, and it's interesting what 2 relatively, like, you take a outright bad team and you make 2 relatively small changes and you get huge differences in performance. But yeah, bit sad Astralis W missed out because I think they put up a big season. They had the chance to make it through, but they did have to beat Navi Javelins in the final game. They unfortunately they didn't.
It's an interesting topic to think about because there's a lot of teams here that you think, honestly, more importantly for me, HSGFE missing out is crazy. Like they lose their key game. They lose here is Crescent FE, a Russian roster with some players you vaguely might recognize if you followed enough, but it's real tough to. Like these are not big names. But you'd expect HSGFE to beat them like comfortably. They're a team who've historically made playoffs at finals with Olga. The addition of Anna is one that I didn't really track, but hey, she's not a bad player. It couldn't have made them that much worse. But they just weren't able to get it done. I expected them to make it through here. Despite moving from the very unstacked Asia region to the very stacked European one, I still expect them to be impressive because they've been a very solid roster internationally in the past. So, no, some big teams missing out. But man, these finals should be stacked, should be fun. We'll see how well promoted they are, if they're promoted at all, if we get any insight into the storylines, the players, the personalities, or if it's just another stock graphic and no one watches. Thank you very much, ESL.
I think they have the best chance to really promote this because for once it's being played in DreamHack Winter in Stockholm, and there's no challenger. Like there's nothing else. So I assume they're gonna have the same sort of stage setup that as all of the challenger events have. They have like a bunch of chairs spaced out and then a decently big land stage. But they have a good chance of being like, there's a LAN convention, a lot of people come here, and the Counter-Strike that is on offer is primarily women's CS, and that's cool. So they have a good chance to promo this really hard.
It's going to be cool for in-person attendance. Online viewership will be struck by the fact that RMR Group B is exactly at the same dates. So any chance of that being watched over G2 Spirit, Eternal Fire, VP Heroic, NIP, like these sorts of teams playing, minimal. But hey, I'll definitely be following along. See if Imperial can win again. Why change things up when you can keep them the same every damn season? The same team dominating absolutely everyone. Because they're just so much better than their competition. It's fully deserved. But yeah, that's the Impact League. Finals coming up soon.
Oof.
will be fascinating to find out who makes it out. But yeah, let's get on to this other small event that also happened. It is Res Champions, Res Regional Champions. I'm sorry for diminishing the name, but it finished already. This was a weird one for me. I did not expect Saturday night to be the grand final.
It was.
And yes, it was. Yes, thank you. That is true. So it's actually over, and a bit of a surprise playoff bracket that played out to me, at least. Because the group stage went pretty much how I expected it to. Sangal 2-0 straight through. Fnatic 2-0 straight through. And then beneath them, NER0 making it out over Fluxo and Aurora. I mean, I didn't expect Aurora to be the pushovers of this group. I thought Fluxo would be weaker, but they did go out last. But NER0 go make playoffs. Fair enough. Unpaid making it past Paravision and Solid. I also thought fairly predictable. I didn't like the look of the Unpaid roster coming in because they did show up with Nexa and Han. And I was a bit like, okay, let's try. Let's try, I guess. I still thought they'd have a good chance against those teams, and they did make it through. So the playoff bracket, Sangal, Unpaid, Fnatic, NER0. If you're like me, you're thinking Sangal, Fnatic final. This is awesome. Two of the teams I've been rooting for in Tier 2. So try and make that sort of Tier 1 push. Well, Sangal end up losing 2-1 to Unpaid, and Fnatic get flat 2-0'd. What a wild pair of matches those were. Grand final, NER0 ends up winning 2-1. Quacke, what's your key takeaway from this event? Like, who really impressed you?
I was impressed by Sangal and Fnatic in the group stage. There was no difference between playoffs and group stage in this event, aside from competition. It was all played in a hotel. They all basically played from their prac rooms. Well, not their prac rooms, they had match rooms, but yeah, it was basically that. Same setup every time. Which is honestly a style of LAN that I like. It's a style of LAN that I think we can do more often because it's presumably much simpler to put on. And honestly, if I was like, just as a small tangent, I would love to see more events like that. Like, instead of hosting a random online cup, if you can host an event in a hotel, do it. Like, fucking do it. I would love that. But anyway, yeah, it's so I do think that Fnatic and Sangal doing as well as they did in the group stage, that is still noteworthy and impressive. They then lose in the playoffs. I think Sangal probably shouldn't lose to Unpaid. The players are good, sure, but they were pugging it. Like, as some people might say, like, oh, next is the IGL. Jacob literally said in his interview that, like, Jacob and Cypher probably make the most, like, create the most plays and, like, talk most about plays. Harn also, of course, is the opera. And then sometimes it comes down to, like, the bottom line is Nexa or Kassad making calls. Like, it's not like anybody's leading this team. They're straight pugging it. But yeah, Sangal probably shouldn't lose that, if I'm honest. Fnatic probably shouldn't lose to NER0, if I'm honest. But yeah, then NER0 win in the final, and I think they probably should have. They're definitely the finals going into that, or the favorites going into that. NER0 are the big like the big ones that impress me. I think the win against Aurora is not I'm not like super impressed by that, because Aurora are also sort of very much up and down right now, and I would say more down than up. Like, rumor is that Deco is retiring after the RMR. Yeah, they had the Clax thing, which, like, they didn't want to lose Resalt, and then they take Clax, and then they didn't want to take Clax, and then, like, it was that whole thing. I think that stuff might be a little bit meh inside that team right now. They still play very close against Sangal. Sangal have to turn that game around in overtime on map 2, not to lose it 2-0 in the first map, or in the first game. Like, that is good, because Sangal were good at this event. Sangal came in as the highest ranked team. I honestly picked them to win. I think they definitely should have won, to be honest. If like, they should have won that Unpaid game, and I think they win the repeat against NER0. But yeah, it's very well done from NER0. They get a big payout of $150,000, which is quite big, honestly. It's also the organization's first, as much as NER0 have been around, and they even technically qualified for a major by being in the 2020 RMR circuit. They would have been at that major if we had actually had a major that year. As much as they've done that, they have never won a LAN event outside of Russia or Belarus as an organization. So that's quite big. And those were all very domestic. So yeah. Nice. I think I was really impressed by some of the players. I'm going to talk more about that later. But yeah.
Yes, we'll get into the exact specifics. I just want to touch on the fact that I did expect this to be the Xanta show for NER0, and it kind of was like the one map I watched early on in the event. But from even at that event, that map it kind of switched up. But no, I think the biggest disappointment for me is Fnatic losing that NER0 series, especially because they get to play Ancient map 1. Fnatic love Ancient. It's a map they've picked in the past, a map they've played really well in the past just because of the players they have. I'd expected them to do so much better. And it was really promising after the group stage with Blamef and Mattis both dropping like a 1.4 rating in the groups, being absolutely immense when it comes to like openings, Mattis entrying, but then also Blamef closing rounds. Everything you expect to see from this team who have tier 1 aspirations. And as Blamef said, it's not going to be, magically done with the team. He's got to step up as well and show that he is legitimately a tier 1 star rifler who deserves all these resources, deserves all this attention, deserves the hate as well as the praise that he receives. He needs to drag them up, and he was doing that in the group stage. And so was Mattis. Mattis was immense against Unpaid and Parivision. And I thought, yeah, this is going to be awesome. Nork was along for the show as well. Like, he wasn't outstanding. Like, he didn't have much to do after those two guys had bodied everyone on the way in. But at least he was keeping up in the ways he needed to. He was hitting the shots that were necessary. So I was excited, but playoff performance, completely different team, it felt like. Nothing really worked, nothing clicked, and the Dust 2, I guess, is closer. But on the map you pick against a roster who you should outweigh in terms of the firepower, I think they'll be very disappointed with the way they went out, and some real hard reflection and consultation as to what went wrong, because they had everything in place to go win this event. It was theirs to win.
Yeah. Interesting, because it's a very interesting event because it's a $250,000 LAN event where there's only one top 30 team in attendance. So that's quite interesting. And it was quite interesting. Funny little note, NER0 had to celebrate their win very quietly. Because the game finished at something 11:30 or something, and they'd had noise complaints from the hotel. So like they basically just like stood up like this and they like talked very, very quietly, and then somebody came into the room and shouted something in Russian, and they all like shh, like they all just sort of turned around like shh, dude, we don't want to get kicked out of the event.
Immediately, though, you just leave the hotel, take to the streets of Belgrade. Like, surely the bars are still open. It's a Saturday night. Like, go find yourself a bar, find yourself a pub, a restaurant, get some nosh in, get a few pints in, keep it sensible, a few pints.
Yep.
Don't go too crazy. Or definitely fucking do, but whatever. No, big event for them. Huge that they finally win a LAN. Obviously, personal disappointments there, but I want to briefly, before we move on to the usual suspects, the Eternal Shuffle prospect of the week. Fluxo is supposed to be a long-term project, as I can quote Art having said. That was how I figured out Art was on Fluxo, to be honest. I'd completely forgotten. How much did you watch of this team at this event, and do you like anything about it?
I watched nothing. I like the slight factoid that Nyx is a previous Fortnite professional.
Really?
That's what I like. Yeah, he is. It's in his Twitter bio. He's an ex-Fortnite pro. I didn't watch anything, and I mean, I like ZV. I like ZV. I think ZV deserves to be in a much better team like this. So I do hope that they can turn it into a much better team than what it is. That's about it.
That's fair. I mean, I personally actually agree with you on Zevi. I think he's a decent little AWPer, but I was surprised and impressed at what I saw out of Piria. There's too many I's and A's in this name that I don't really know how to pronounce, but Piria
Junior, maybe.
Piria Junior. I mean, put a space, use capitals, do something. Come on.
I'd probably just say Piranha, like Pariah.
You're a grown man. Like, use capitals. But he was actually really impressive. When I actually got to see his POV, he's really sharp. Like, I'm a big fan of that pickup for them. They've scouted very well in that sense. I think he used to be Furia Academy. Or at least another. Yeah, he was Furia Academy in 2021, 2022. He was there for a 6-month period. So Art's kept his eye on him and clearly followed him since then. And he's been all over the shop, but finally lands here. And yeah, so far, He's not played a lot with them, but this event, I at least got to see glimpses of his mechanics. He's definitely a very skilled player. Kai also looks way better on this team than he did in the past. Still not expecting him to be some superstar player, but at least I think he can be a valuable member on this Fluxo team as they build up. Potentially in the future as a player, they look to level up in terms of a change, but for now, solid enough. So, no, I do agree. If they want to build for the long run, they've done the right thing in terms of the players they've signed. For once, it's a team who understand their place in the ecosystem and know that it is going to be a slow process. It's not going to be instant, but they've made the right signings. Zevi's still fairly young, only 23. They've got a year or so more, I think, of building left before they really start taking their results too seriously. But they've already picked up a best-of-3 win against a European roster. More than most teams in Brazil, starting from the bottom, can say. So I'm fairly impressed.
Yep. Well done.
All right.
No notes.
No notes. Fair enough. Let's go on to the Eternal Shuffle because there's a fucking lot.
Yep.
There's a whole lot that happened. Let's start with the Bleed are now unpaid. Quacke, there's details about this. Like, what exactly happened? Because I saw this. I read the article, skimmed the tweets. It's kind of. What exactly happened with the Bleed organization?
So the Bleed organization has not been keeping up with their payments. This happened while I was on the train to Gothenburg, literally like an hour into the train ride. This tweet appeared in front of my eyes, and it was Kassad with a big, what is basically a tweet longer in 2024. An image with text. They haven't been getting paid. Basically the details of it is that, like, the first salary took 4 months to come through. A lot of players are still owed money. A lot of the no longer contracted or benched players are owed money or were owed money. Are actually owed money, and a lot of the still contracted players are actually owed money. I think Jacob hinted at that much, but they didn't want to make that public. Like, Kazad actually made public how much players like Faven or Cirque were owed, because they are now in other teams. They were owed like several tens of thousands of dollars each. But Jacob also hinted at the fact that the contracted players also have are owed a lot of money. But they didn't want to speak about that since it's the CEO has gone completely missing. All of his accounts are deleted. The CEO being Singaporean, I think.
Yep.
Since the org is Singaporean, I would assume so is he. Yeah, Mervin Goh En Wei is his name. He has gone completely AWOL. He's gone completely underground. Nobody's answering. He's not answering any sort of communication. All of his accounts are dead, and they are now being taken to court. Yeah, it's just shit. The Apex haven't received any payment for Knock nor Jacob, and Apex actually wanted to pursue that. They wanted to get Jacob back at one point to try to sell him on
Right.
somewhere else since they didn't receive their money. NIP said they did get paid for Hampus, but it took a lot of nagging to make that happen. A lot of buyouts haven't been paid out. Prize money, which has been paid to the org and to be distributed to the players, has not been distributed. A lot of money is still owed for everybody. Kassad has been funding a lot of stuff out of his own pocket. I think Kassad basically set up, and I don't know if the players contributed, but they basically paid for their own boot camp ahead of the RMR. And all of the time, like, Jacob basically said that, like, well, there have been times when Kassad had like stepped out of practice because he had to take a phone call to basically talk, like, chat to the Bleed organization and chew them out. This has been a problem for a lot of other people as well. The Bleed Valorant division had a similar issue. I don't understand what is the thing with like the Valorant franchise leagues, but they lost their spot there, and that was somehow a factor. All of the other Bleed teams have said the same thing. We are owed money. We aren't getting paid. Yada yada yada, here and there, and there's a lot of big problems basically. And that is the rundown of it. So they left basically claiming that our contract is no longer valid, so we're just not going to fucking play. And they now play under the name Unpaid, which is amazing. Like that's such a marketing W, to be honest. Like that's a big way to highlight what's going on. I do think, yeah, Bleed are being taken to court. I don't think it was specifically related to the CS team. I assume that's going to be taken into account because it was a money issue. Like it was, but I think it was the Valorant team who took them to court. And I'm assuming that, you know, Counter-Strike can sort of get folded into that. Yeah, but they basically went like, we have 2 more events to play, which we have committed ourselves to, and we're going to do that under the name Unpaid. And they bring back Nexa from the bench, from the Bleed bench, where he still is. I think he's still contracted. Vladen as well, who was on the main team, so to speak. Cypher as well, and Jacob, and then they brought in Harn, who I think was like rumored to be the knock replacement, but then all of this basically broke loose. Right. That's the rundown. And it kind of sucks. It's esports, period. That's what it is. This is it's not new. It's just sad that it's still happening.
No, it's frustrating if you're the players, especially, and if you're someone on the outside, you're like, God damn it, can someone be real? Like, we know that it's a difficult business right now to make real money in, but not paying people and just disappearing into the ether is just bitch made. So hopefully we can get that sorted out. Those guys can get paid, and Unpaid can maybe find themselves a new org if they keep playing well, because yeah, this was a decent performance from them.
Yeah, especially if they're like straight pugging it. That's impressive. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, next, the ENTS signings. We've talked about the results, but yes, ENTS officially add NER0 and Kaspersky. Pretty cool signings. I think separately both had been rumored, and I even suggested when previewing, I believe Elisa Espoo, I was like, yeah, if they do have, like, I only thought one of them was being signed. I was like, if they do have Kaspersky or they do have NER0, like, all of a sudden I'm more excited. But if I'm playing with like a pretty whatever team, it's a bit of an issue. Like, the way they've been playing, who they were, just wasn't working out. But they did make 2 signings. They signed both the players I wanted, both the most exciting players they could have, I think, given their typical budgets. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with the results so far. Can't complain. ENTS probably smashed it again. We'll see how the results develop, but this is a good start.
Yeah, they had a lot of players to pick from. They had Bro was not so much rumored as explicitly said. Andu was also rumored to be trialing with them. There was another player I was thinking about. No, I think it was basically those 4. Yeah, I'm glad they went for these 2 though. I think they might have knocked it out of the park with that. They had a lot of, I think they did the old ENTS thing of like, let's just take a bunch of players and trial them out and see who's good. And they found 2 good ones, and they probably picked the best 2 ones. So yeah, good job.
Yeah, very impressed. Right. Saw. Minus Aros Dosh, minus Berry, and they signed Agil or whatever that is.
Yeah.
But yeah, a weird moment for Saw, because you think, they're pretty much on top of the world relative to where they can be. Seems like an odd time to be letting a player like that go. But Berry leaving as well, and we see, I'm not sure who was it who tweeted this, there might be some stuff coming about like Saw as an org that's like not too positive. What exactly the details on that? Did you pick that up?
A lot of it is not known. I assume that if you speak Portuguese, you would know more. Aros Doce wanted out. It was something he supposedly decided ahead of time, but he basically wanted the option to leave the team. And what sort of happened then is that his contract, which was set to expire in March of 2025, instead was shortened to end at the end of this year, and he was subsequently benched at the same time. Then Barry also leaves. I heard a bunch of stuff, and I don't know what is true. The person who tweeted something about the SAW organization is Aristoch's agent, who helped him negotiate this leave, basically.
Right.
I think it's extremely strange that it's such a promising player such as Aristotle decides to leave the team right before an RMR and immediately after their biggest achievements. To me, that says something is very wrong.
Right.
So, yeah. I also heard some other people say this was just random Twitter replies. I have no fucking idea if this is true. I have no clue about the credentials of the people who wrote this. I think it is literally just fans basically, like what they are supposing is that Muteris and Roman basically control the team. What I would assume they're implying is that Barry and Aristotle had some sort of disagreement with Muteris or Roman, and they wanted to leave the team. I don't think Barry wanted to leave the team as much as he was cut. It might be, if this is true, it might be something like the players didn't want him. Muteris is calling, so that would kind of make sense if the coach gets cut for that. But I have no fucking idea if that's true. So big grain of salt on that. They haven't said much, but they also did sort of clown on the agent who was blaming the organization. I think there's some sort of fuckery going on here. I assume if Aristotle eventually ends up on another team, we're gonna find out about that in an HLTV interview at some point when he plays another LAN, I guess. I think they've completely shot their chances at the major because Barry was one of the reasons that was working out. Aristotle was another big reason why it was working out. I don't think they're gonna make the major. That's pretty much the period it is. Agil is fine, I guess. I think he's a decent player in the teams he's played in before.
He's played
been like the Rhino.
Yeah,
it's been the Rhino kind of guys, the guys who show up at the bottom of like CCT cups and that sort of thing. And he did fine. I don't have big hopes.
no,
Aristotle is such a huge player. I think Aristotle has been so huge. Like Aristotle is a tier 1 contender. And I think that's a huge pair of shoes to fill. So yeah, good luck, but no.
Yeah, disappointing, but all right. Copenhagen Wolves have added Andu and Magilla. Bit of a weird duo to see come in, but it kind of, if you've never heard of them, firstly, Andu, obviously you'll have heard of from Gamer Legion, formerly of their academy, but then leaves when he basically doesn't have his roles for like 3 months and then finally goes, all right, screw it, let me go. But then Magilla, rifler for Granny's Knockers.
Mm-hmm.
Once of Danish fame, but most recently of Lithuanian acclaim with players like Streaken and
Shout out Streaken!
Yeah, Streaken, our boy, and no one else we've ever heard of or will even remember the name of. But
some people might recognize Slocker. I think Slocker has been around.
Slocker's been around in Lithuania for a long time. Yeah, it feels like he's not that old. But
leave a comment if you're Lithuanian.
I guess, yeah. Say hi in Lithuanian.
Shout out my Lithuanians.
Say hi in Lithuanian. I don't speak Lithuanian, but it'll be funny to see how you say hi. If it's just hi or hey, what the hell other languages? Be more interesting.
Yeah.
But no, it's weird because it now looks like they just have Copenhagen Wolves have a really solid young rifle core now, and I still have some questions about, is Tupperware even on the team, and do I want him if he is? But otherwise, no, this roster slowly getting more interesting. I mean, I think Shane's just been a really solid player on this roster and has deserved better results. So yeah, the fact they've added some riflers, they've replaced Fessor, they've replaced Sorsol. Hopefully they can get more consistent and potentially get a few more wins. But it's not that crazy of a team right now. Just maybe something to keep an eye out on, given their rifle talent that they've acquired.
Yeah, they play everything, absolutely everything, and they have Tohio as a coach who actually is half decent. Because he was around as a player for a very long time, and then he coached Windigo, I think, when they won their big thing. That was him behind them. Then he's been around, and most recently he did an NIP Impact. But yeah, now he's here.
Yeah, pretty cool. BC Game have dropped Anarchez. In case you didn't know, BC Game still existed.
Yeah,
they've been playing the occasional game of Counter-Strike, but I've not really noticed. Ever since the whole Joel thing happened, it's been kind of just awkward. And so yeah, now Anarchez has been benched. Guardians filled in for 2 maps and dropped a 1.4 rating. Lord only knows if that becomes his comeback arc. That would be hilarious.
Yeah.
But, you know, you never know. Stranger things have happened. I mean, they really haven't, but stranger things have happened. To be fair, actually, no, he played those 2 maps as a stand-in. It wasn't even now. It was in like back in August or September. So maybe he can bring something.
Quartz was missing from that game, and he.
Not the last game they played.
Yeah, they've played non-HLTV stuff. They've played some Liquipedia games. But
jeez.
Yeah.
Okay, wow, weird team, but yeah, I guess Anarchis is gone. Mission Possible have been assembled with, honestly, it's an awful name, but whatever, guys. It's better than some of the other random no-name teams I've seen. Tokyo Avengers or whatever the hell that was equally terrible. It's probably worse. And so the roster is Borup, Bird from Sky, Vegi, Matti, and Likala, a Swedish fella. And the team have Likale. Is it actually pronounced Likale?
Yeah, people normally say. I've heard some people say like Likale or Lissale. I think it's Likale.
What's the point? Anyway, they've played 2 series and a BO1. And in that time, I've got a decent view on who they are. Firstly, Bird from Sky, I still think is a massively undervalued IGL on the scene who has historically been amazing at extracting, I mean, not water from stone. Like, he's somehow pulled wine out that shit. Like some fine ass, I want to drink that wine from literal rocks that no one else has even managed to make anything palatable from. He's been outstanding at optimizing, maximizing lesser rosters, and here's probably going to be his toughest challenge yet. But this Lysale or Lykale, I'm going to call him Limescale, has so far been fairly impressive. If you told me he's been like a top FPL player for a while, like he's not just some nobody.
Number 1 on Faceit. He played. He's played a bunch with like the. He didn't play much HLTV, but he's played a bunch with like the big name players who have come through. It's just been the old Swedish thing. He hasn't really taken it serious enough to, go big. But he's played the top flight of Swedish CS in the Elite Series this season. They kind of lost out, but he was huge. So for most of the season, actually, it isn't finished yet. They have one more game, but yeah, it's been him, Mistfire, and a guy called Really Yummy for a lot of the time. Who are good players. Like Mistfire is a name you'll recognize from various mixes. Because he has also been around playing with like the Flow School guys, like with when Nilo was around, Chaucy, those kind of guys. Anyway, it's been he's a very good player. He was top number 1 Faceit for a long time, and people in Sweden know about him. People outside of Sweden know fuck all about him. But yeah, he's very cracked.
Well, hopefully that works out. I like that IGL. Bird from Sky, been a favorite for a while. We'll see how it goes.
Yep.
But all right. Drillers have cut Amsalem, added Senary. The biggest news around this move, because obviously no one's taking Drillers that seriously, because they're Drillers. The biggest thing that happened here was the change happened, and then Loba Yanitsa, Mr. The pile of HGH that plays Counter-Strike, decided to start talking shit about War 2K. I don't know if anything like that's relevant, but the team is probably a bit of an upgrade. Some people were getting outraged about them cheesing the system of, they're now no longer 3 Asian, but he was their bench player, so it's not like they made a fake substitution. And also, they already kind of did cheese the system with a dual national slipping them into an Asian qualifier. So whatever, now's not the right time to get mad about it, in my opinion. I don't think it's that big a deal. I also don't think this is a notable enough upgrade to really make them that big of a threat, like compared to before. Like they already had some threat. This hasn't really changed it. Like they're still just them.
I don't think it's a huge deal whatsoever with the substitution thing. I think it is putting a weird precedent in place. And I think it is something that you maybe could cheese a lot if you play your cards right. Like the extreme end of this would be something like Liquid making the North American RMR and then making a substitute change to bring in a much better European player. In this case, you wouldn't do that because you have Twist and Naf, and those are your best players. But yeah, let's say wildcard, maybe they want to cut Jeba or something, or they want to sell Jeba or whatever, and they instead bring in Donk. Like that's the extreme end of this. But yeah, it's a bit of a nothing. I think this change was made out of necessity, as far as I heard. I think it was Salem had trouble getting to China.
Okay.
But then I think what he himself said was that it was like he didn't really He just left. I don't know. Scenario, they haven't tried to cheese anything. It's not like this was something they wanted to abuse. It's yeah. It's just this kind of happened. It was Scenario who came in, and he's going to play the RMR. People are losing their tits over this, but I don't think it's going to be a huge deal. Although I like with the results they've had in Europe while they're doing this. Oh yeah, some people said it was money. Like some people said it was money that like they were getting just getting a $50,000 payout and choosing the RMR. No, they didn't get $50,000. They actually have no salary. Olympics have confirmed this. He doesn't pay them aside from paying for the boot camp and paying for all of this stuff because their main goal is to get Pixel's face into the game as a sticker. That is their main goal. But yeah, they've been playing in Europe and they've actually played half decent. I think they've played a bunch of like CCT series kind of things. They went let me see here. They went 3-1 in the Swiss stage of one of these CCT ones, and then they lost to Game Leader in the playoffs, and then they went 1-3 in another CCT one. But they did lose to like TSM and Monty, so yeah. Good job, and I think they have a decent chance of making it out of the RMR.
Yeah, no, I mean it's the Asia RMR. It's a non-zero chance essentially where they stand.
Yeah.
I don't think it's very likely, but hey,
I'd put
it's
them
not that
above
crazy
some of them.
given some of the talent they have.
Yeah.
But all right, next move is a bit of a weird one. It's like a double. Alter Ego add Dobu, and Atox add Score. So the weird thing is here is I didn't realize Dobu had left Atox. And he has just magically...
He transferred from Atox.
Yeah,
so,
he's magically appeared from Atox, gone to Alter Ego to play alongside Bentet, Zine, Freeman, and Aidkit. A bit of an odd roster, but certainly one with menace, some threat, and some potential. They are going to be playing in the Asia RMR, unlike Atox. So Dobu obviously taking his opportunity in both hands there to go play in the RMR. But it leaves Atox with Cabal, Score, Yami, and MIQ, and certainly talented enough is Yami and Score. It's just a bit weird because now they're pretty much down to no AWPA.
Yeah, because Annihilation
benched. Yeah, so he forced his way out. Dobu ends up transferring. Bit of an awkward spot for Atox. I think Alter Ego are going to be a very dangerous team at the RMR, though. Like, that's a talented group who can cause some upsets.
Pound for pound, this is a major qualifier, I think. But yeah, that's pound for pound. Yeah, Bentet, Freeman, Zine, very solid. Aidkit, underrated, I think. He has played in very bad teams, but it's always been his teammates who kind of come through and play better stuff. I'm trying to remember, was he ever a teammate of Kicksands, perhaps?
Might have been. Was he on Blue Jays?
He was, yeah. Kicksands was on Blue Jays, yeah. As was Aidkit and Tatsanito. And also some slightly less notable names of like Zikos and Danny, who other people might know. Yeah, underrated, I think, is Aidkit. So yeah, let's see what they do. I think they can probably win a game, maybe. But yeah.
I think they can make a decent attempt at a run. But the Asia RMR, yeah, that'll be something. Yeah. Revenant officially cut Adex. He's been not playing, if you've noticed, for a little while. Finally officially cut. I'm not sure what the delay was. But yeah, I didn't check the official reasons. I mean, I did an interview with Pakish for members. He was coach and GM of Revenant. So if you want to find out his thoughts at the time that he was making public, that's the place to go. He wasn't cut yet, but it was happening. You know, he wasn't playing. We had a chat about what's going on. He didn't really say at that point he was cut, but you know, he never played again. So make of that what you will. Finally, GGA How have assembled the dream team of nothing. Issa, Aaron, Bibu, Denislav, and Mini. What a team, I guess. Bit awkward, these GGA How moves, because they signed some of the most random players. And this is another classic example. We're still rooting for Mini, aren't we? Like we still think he's got a chance to make it as a proper player and probably in Europe. But the rest of this group as a combo, you think a bit bit nothingy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Para and Denislaw is here, and yeah, it's a bit weird. I was surprised they cut Osama's because he has been fucking huge all throughout, but you know, could be other problems. Um, it's fascinating. Honestly, it's a fascinating team looking at this, but it's not one that I think is going to do too much. I do if they're in Europe, like if they're in Europe and making a proper go of this, then I might actually give them, you know, slight bit of like credit. But I'm not sure they are. Like, I guess they would be, but like if Issa is going to be playing on German servers from Jordan and Mini is going to be in Lebanon and Bibu is going to be in he is from Iraq. Like, if that's the kind of thing we're talking about, that's not really particularly serious. If GG How are flying these guys out to Europe, that's pretty cool. Like, that's and that's a team that I think can do half decent. Because also, pound for pound, this is a half decent team. So yeah, let's see what happens.
Yeah, not expecting too many things, but who knows. But all right, let's move on to prospects of the week. It has been 2 weeks, so I'll be factoring in when I do the graphics all the numbers from that 2-week stretch, not just this last week. But I'm going to lead off with mine. It's a classic pick. I picked his teammate 2 weeks ago, but now I'm picking him. Quacke and I. Na'Vi Junior are a weird team, as in they just keep winning stuff and they're an academy. What the hell? Guys, know your place. But at the top of the table is quite often a duo, the opening duo for this team. Quacke and Makaze. And this week, Quacke and I, or this pair of weeks, Quacke and I was really outstanding. He's the one I picked. And you'll see this a lot on demos if you ever watch them. You'll see Makaze like, things aren't seeming to go his way. Like, you know, he's taking some tough deaths in mid on Ancient, for example. But like, they win rounds. And if you go to Quacke and I's POV, all of a sudden you see him banging 2 heads off at A itself or in lane or vice versa. They do spawn based, like decide who plays what spots a lot of the time. Like you'll see on Mirage, Makaze's supposed to be the short player, but if he's got the connector spawn, they'll switch it up. He sometimes go into window. It just depends on the spawns between these guys. But Quacke and I is also quite talented. I think the part that makes him slightly less excited for people is that he's 2 years older than Makaze. Makaze is 17. But Quacke and I deserves a lot of credit. These 2 weeks, he's been insanely impactful. The best player on Na'Vi Junior during an outstanding run with a lot of wins against legit full teams like Cybershock. Against teams like even, what's it called, Arcred. They've been around a lot in Tier 2, and beating them is no mean feat. So, big credit to Quacke and I. Very talented fragger. I expect to see a lot more from him in the future, and hey, this Kosovo duo might end up going somewhere as a combo. Like, could see them pair up with some bigger names from that kind of region. You never know.
Yeah. It's, you don't really none of these people are names that I had paid any attention to before Na'Vi Junior, and now they are just kind of crazy. So, which is something insane about this team. But yeah, they had an amazing run. They've actually just lost the map a couple of minutes ago, and that was their first loss in the past 2 weeks. Map loss. And yeah, Quacke and I has been the guy. Hugely talented roster. Just keep doing what they're doing. And we talked about Makaze the other week, and we were like, this is going to be some of the tier 1 players in the next 2-3 years. It's possibly Quacke and I is also up there with them. It's a good pick, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely is. All right, your pick. It's an interesting one. I'm not sure no one really expected this name to be on everyone's lips this week, but
no,
he has been good, hasn't he?
We talked about Nemiga winning regional champs, and none of the players like super huge across the entire event. Like, other teams had like a Jota or a Blame F who was going insane for their team, but Nemiga were sort of a little bit lukewarm. Like, they had Xanter, who has sort of been the guy I think people started talking about as soon as Flammes left, because people said that like Nemiga are going to get worse without Flammes, and Xander is going to be the guy to pick up the torch, maybe, so to speak. People talk about Khan because he was rumored to some bigger teams as the opera. The player who sort of stepped up in Res Regional Champions, and especially in the final, especially in one map of the final, is Zwei, the 17-year-old Russian player on Amiga. He put up a great event here. He was a top-rated player, narrowly beating out his teammate Risky Bob, but especially in great name, but especially on Ancient, where they sort of turned the game around in the final. He dropped a 26-11 and a 184 rating, which is big. He played a great event throughout as well. In the series against Fnatic, he had a sort of a off game, but also like the wins they had, like Zwei, yeah, big against Aurora. He was very big against Fluxo as well. Like he played a very good game, and for a 17-year-old, I'm not sure this would have been his first LAN. It honestly could have been his first LAN event ever. And they go ahead and win it, and he is the guy. So yeah, like it's mostly just that, like 17-year-old player doing this well in what is a debut LAN in some sense, is huge and well done, especially like so recently after joining. He only joined in June, which would have been when Flamus left. This is the Flamus replacement. So yeah, good fucking job.
Yeah, Zwei for me, or Zwei, whatever, was a bit of a shocker because like when I've watched their games in the past, I'm watching for Xanta like online. He's one of my prospects whose demo I've put up for members. Zwei wasn't really on my radar. I knew he was young, but that's about it. But at this event, I watched a couple of their Mirage games, especially. My lord, he was finding so much impact, so many big kills, like round-turning moments early on. And the fact that he then had an outstanding Ancient in the grand final, definitely something to watch. Probably will download that demo, actually, now that I think about it. Because he was surprisingly good. It's more that he was able to outperform his roles rather than like, oh, I knew he had no talent. No. He's been skilled. Like, he's been around the block in Amiga now for a little bit. We know he's not a bum. It's just, his roles pretty limited. So he's not really the guy with the big numbers, the big round-winning performances. Here, though, insane. So probably outplays his role limit, essentially, in this event to allow them to go all the way, because they don't have their big star performances. Khan wasn't great. Xanta wasn't great. So Zwei, whatever. Stepping up, finding form, and dominating was essential. And now look at them. Champions of an actual trophy. 150k in the bag. We love to see it.
Yeah. Great work.
But okay, let's wrap up the show there. So yeah, if you enjoyed, please leave a like, sub if you want to see more. Leave comments telling us why we're wrong, or, any other sort of detail you want. We don't care. We like comments. We read all of them for some stupid reason. And yeah, we'll see you next Sunday. We should all be in town and ready to go. All right, goodbye.